The once lively city of Warsaw was now mostly destroyed due to the German and Soviet bombings in 1939. Cafes, stations, and schools were crumbled down to mere heaps of stone. The streets were deserted, with most of the Polish having fled the city or killed during the raids. The only ones who still dared to stay was the resistance. Amongst the resistance fighters was a young man by the name of Mateusz Borgzeba. He was of half Polish and German descent. At the beginning of the invasion he managed to get his parents out of the country, but he decided to stay and defend his home from the invader. It pained him to see people of his own blood tear each other to pieces. Mateusz joined a group of about 30 strong who had their hideout in a destroyed part of the city. A once flourishing cafe had survived the onslaught and now served purpose of hiding the Polish in plain sight. Though there was not much German activity around them, they still had people constantly on the lookout. Recently, the group had been talking about a big assault and holdout on the big church, but in order to do that, they would need more weapons and ammo. A nearby German outpost was not heavily defended, with only a few infantry and a sniper in the tower posing the biggest threat. The resistance fighters had already snuck in there multiple times to steal small amounts of ammo under the enemy's very noses. But for this operation, the Polish needed more, and an assault on the outpost would be necessary. Lucky for them, a small broken piece of wall offered the perfect entry point to surprise the Germans. About half of the group would go, to ensure a quick victory before the outpost could be reinforced. It was a bit of a walk through the ruins, and every now and then they needed to sneak by a German patrol. Then they finally reached the outpost and with a quick signal started the attack. As expected, the Germans were surprised as they were doing maintenance. The resistance fighters poured inside, giving each other cover as the Germans were still dazed from the confusion. They took cover in the small building as they took out most Germans on the ground level. The sniper indeed posed a threat in his high tower, but with most of the Polish concentrating their fire on him, he eventually was taken out. The only Germans who were left hid in the maintenance shed. They had no way to go as the resistance closed in on their position. When they were finally completely cornered, the fighters entered as well and killed most of them without trouble. Amongst the Germans there were 3 who had laid down their weapons and surrendered. The Polish soldier who had led the assault by the name of Piotr Brzezinski had the 3 move to the bunker nearby to be executed. Mateusz urged Piotr not to go through with this. He said that these men had surrendered and were unarmed. He did not want to see his group do the same cruelty as the enemy did. He pleaded to show that they were better than them, and on top of that, they could question them for intel. Piotr argued that the Germans never showed them mercy, so why should they receive it now? When the Polish checked the Germans' papers, there was one of them who was still in his teens, freshly departed from his hometown Stuttgart. Mateusz argued he was just a simple soldier, not guilty of any war crimes. But Piotr would hear none of it, and gave the order for the kill. Back at the hideout, the resistance checked their loot, and found out they managed to sneak out lots of weapons, including 3 MG42s. These would play a huge role in the assault. Then shortly after, the leader of the group told the members of a different resistance group who were doing well in the eastern part of the city. As he expected his group not to survive the holdout at the church, he said it was okay to leave and join the group if someone felt so inclined. And so that same night, a few members, including Piotr, snuck past the German control point to reach the other group. After all that big talk, Piotr did not have the courage to go through with the assault on the church. The assault and holdout would happen that next morning. The Polish would enter through an underground entrance and set up defenses outside. What they did not expect was that several Germans were inside the church when they entered. A short, frantic firefight broke out, and the Poles lost 2 of their own, but managed to take out the Germans inside. Then the resistance finally could set up position out in the front of the church. It provided perfect cover and a heightened platform, making it the perfect place to hold out. When they saw the Germans approaching, all of them opened fire. The soldiers quickly dove for cover as they tried to fire back. Mateusz was amongst the resistance fighters of the church as he had good oversight of the area. They also had several members with anti-tank weapons they got from the outpost in case armor would show up. Due to the large distance, they were not able to deal great damage, but they managed to take out a few soldiers on the field. And every now and then they did lose one of their own fighters. More and more Germans were called to aid at the church. The Polish were outnumbered 3-1, but still managed to hold the enemy at bay. The Germans brought heavier equipment and attacked from multiple directions at once. Through the underground entrance, the resistance had members run back and forth to resupply the troops with ammo. The Germans drew closer, but the resistance was able to hold. Still, as the battle went on, the resistance lost their front troops eventually, as more and more Germans attacked their position. And to make matters worse, the Germans had called in armor support to help attack the church. As the tank came into view, the resistance leader yelled at his anti-tank units to focus fire on the armor. The tank was still out of firing range and needed to come closer before it could be hit. As the tank broke through the building, one of the fighters fired his anti-tank weapon and crippled it. Another shot finished it off and forced the crew to disembark. This was huge for the resistance, as they were not only able to hold off the oppressor, but take out its feared armor too. However, their ray of hope was soon vanquished, as the Germans had finally called in the help of the SS. Skillfully trained and well equipped, they were a devastating addition to the German attackers. Resistance fighters died left and right as they lacked the combat skill and manpower the enemy had. Both Polish flanks got wiped out, and eventually Mateusz was killed as well. Only 2 resistance fighters were left, who still held their position with the MG42. But the Germans had reached the church, and their flamethrower units torched them alive. With loud screams, the heroic holdout came to an end, but it was not seen as a failure. The flames surrounding the church vanished, leaving mutilated and smoldering corpses in its wake. But the spirits of other resistance fighters throughout Poland were kindled when they heard how these few men were able to hold out against a vastly superior army and its tanks. The results and consequences from this holdout would echo throughout the entirety of the war.